And welcome everybody to the GSMC Sports Podcast. I am your host Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Tuesday, February 18th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss today. So we are going to start off the show. We are going to talk about the Bengals' plans to franchise tag T. Higgins once again, as they are looking to negotiate a long-term deal with him. We'll also talk about Draymond Green. I know we talked about him yesterday in his comments on the NBA All-Star Game, but we're going to talk about what he said regarding the Warriors and how, with the acquisition of Jimmy Butler, he feels like they can win the championship. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about Aaron Judge. He met with the media yesterday for the first time, and he was asked about Juan Soto, and we'll talk about what Judge had to say, because now this is, like I said, this is the first time Judge is speaking publicly since Soto left to join the Mets. So I wanted to get into that. We will also talk about Aaron Rodgers once again. He supposedly was pleading with the Jets to keep him and give him a year or two, but another year or two, but that ended up not happening. So we'll get into that, and also just talk about how, with the Matthew Stafford trade rumors up in the air, and Russell Wilson's a free agent, Aaron Rodgers is now a free agent, which quarterback should a team want the most? So we'll get into that as well. And then in the final part of the show, we'll talk about Mike Trout and how he is changing positions this upcoming season to try to preserve him. He's a guy that's dealt with a lot of injuries over the last several years, so we'll get into that as well. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about T. Higgins. So it looks like the Bengals are going to franchise tag T. Higgins once again. This happened last season, and he played under the tag. Missed some time due to injury, but that's kind of happened. He's a guy that has dealt with injuries over the course of his career, but when he plays, he's very productive, and he put together another solid season. Even though he missed some time. But the Bengals are looking to keep this group together. And Joe Burrow has emphasized that when he's met with the media. I know when he was on First Take, they talked about it with him. But he wants to keep this team together. And, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, they all want to stay together and try to win a championship together. And it's going to be tough because these players deserve big contracts. Jamar Chase is coming off of a season where he won the Triple Crown. T. Higgins, had a productive season. On the year, he had 73 receptions for 911 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns. And he played in 12 games. So imagine if he played the whole season, what kind of year he could have had. And yeah, so you're going to have to figure out a way to keep him, Jamar Chase, and Trey Hendrickson also happy. Now, I think Joe Burrow is willing to, restructure his deal to try to, keep the band together. I don't know if it's going to happen, if I'm going to be honest. I definitely think they need to prioritize keeping Jamar Chase. I've said that all along. I think if you had to choose between Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, I'm choosing Jamar Chase. And the other thing, too, is the Bengals just had a year where their defense was bad. It was not good, and it was kind of the main reason they didn't make the playoffs. Because look at all the shootouts that the Bengals got into. And some blame fell on Joe Burrow because he would turn the ball over in a crucial moment, and that would lead to points. Now, the second Ravens game, they were up by a couple of scores, and their offense stalled, and that allowed the Ravens to get back in the game. But for the most part, their defense let them down this year. And that is an area that needs to improve. And if you're paying two wide receivers a ton of money, and on top of that, you got to figure out how to, negotiate a contract with Trey Hendrickson as well, how are you going to be able to fix this defense? You're really going to have to nail your picks in the draft because you're not going to be able to go out and, sign a bunch of free agents. Not saying, that's you want to spend like a drunken sailor, which many people have used that term over the last. I feel like I've heard that term more recently uh, than before, but yeah, people have been using that term. But you want to maybe at least get an impactful player on the defensive side of the ball by dipping your toes in free agency. They're not going to be able to do that. It's kind of going to be like the Cowboys offseason last year, where you signed Dak, you signed CD to these long-term deals, and then that's it. Then you just rely on your draft class. I mean, the Cowboys did also sign some other free agents, but they weren't really that impactful. One of them was bringing back one of their own. Really, was bringing back Ezekiel Elliott. But yeah, that's the one problem I have is your cap. Majority of it is going to be going to 3 or 4 players. That's not good. Now, I guess with the Bengals, if they franchise tag him, he doesn't hit the open market, and if they're not able to work out a long-term deal, they could trade him, and you get assets back for him. So that's beneficial. But ideally, they want to keep T. Higgins around. But the other thing too is, if you get a long-term deal with T. Higgins done before Jamar Chase, is that going to rub Jamar Chase the wrong way? Jamar Chase just had an incredible year. He should be the number one priority. But they don't want T. Higgins to hit the open market. They're going to have to multitask. They're going to have to try to figure out long-term deals with both players. And you could throw Trey Hendrickson in there because we've been talking about him. And try to get it all done relatively quick. And if not, then, you try to get long-term deals done with Jamar Chase and Trey Hendrickson, and then I guess you're looking for a trade partner for T. Higgins. And T. Higgins, it's going to be a bidding war for him if the Bengals aren't able to come to a agreement with him on a long-term contract. There are plenty of teams out there that need wide receiver help. Plenty. So they're going to have no problem finding a trade partner, which I think that is the likely scenario, in my opinion. I've said that all along. I would be shocked if it went the other way around and they kept T. Higgins and they traded Jamar Chase. That it's not going to happen. And you would really tick off Joe Burrow if that happened. You want to make sure your quarterback is happy. I don't think that's happening. I think, and I've said it all along, the more likely scenario is T. Higgins will not be a Bengal next year. I'll believe it when I see it. Yes, it seems like they're going to franchise tag him, but ultimately, I think what's going to happen is they're not going to be able to get the numbers to match, and he's going to be playing elsewhere in 2025. And honestly, like I've been saying, I think it might be for the better because you need to fix this defense. Now, I would love to see them all stay together because the Bengals offense is really fun to watch when it's clicking. And T. Higgins really does help Jamar Chase. Joe Burrow even said it. Yeah, okay. Opposing defenses, focus all your attention on Jamar Chase. Then you leave T. Higgins one-on-one. And T. Higgins had some monster games. That game against the Broncos, yes, the Bengals ultimately didn't make the playoffs, but T. Higgins came up big in that game. Had a couple of touchdowns. He had the big catch down the sideline that set up the game-winning touchdown because they were not letting Cade York kick that football again because they knew they didn't trust him. But they trusted Joe Burrow and they trusted T. Higgins to get it done, and that's what happened. Well, really, that whole offense. I mean, we didn't know where that pass was going to go until the play developed. It happened. T. Higgins caught the game-winning touchdown, and the Bengals were still alive at that point. But like I said, I would love for them to stay together. I just don't know if it's going to happen. If Joe Burrow wants to, like I said, if he wants to restructure his contract, so be it. But then it's like, all right, you got everybody back, but where does that leave the defense? They changed coordinators, so we'll see if that helps. But it's also getting the right personnel in there that takes the field and executes. And they lost a lot of guys over the years. Guys in the secondary they lost to free agency. Guys just left in general. They need to fix this defense. It's not the defense that it was when they went on that miracle run to the Super Bowl to face the Rams. They gotta fix it. So we'll see how this all develops, but it does look like once again T. Higgins is going to get the franchise tag. Let me know what you guys think about that. What are your thoughts on that? Let me know in the comments. We'll see if they're able to pull it off and keep everybody together, but it's going to be very tough. So we are going to take our first break of the show, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about basketball. We'll talk about Draymond Green. We touched upon some of his comments on the All-Star game a little bit yesterday, but now we're actually going to talk about something else he said, and that is him declaring that the Warriors will win the championship this year with the acquisition of Jimmy Butler. So we're going to talk about that when we come back from our first break. I'll give you my thoughts on that and how realistic that is. So make sure to stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC football. Nope, I did it again. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.